Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon's panel, The Afghan Poser. As you all know, we've now entered the 17th year of this long and increasingly complex war. You also know the numbers: more than $1 trillion spent, over 30,000 civilian deaths, and there really is no end in sight. Regionally, Afghanistan continues to be caught in a great power politics, and it remains wary of threats from neighbours like Pakistan and Iran. The domestic scenario is equally challenging and uncertain. The country is burdened by factional warfare and dysfunctional politics. And now, after almost 2 decades of America's longest war, the people I speak to who are heavily engaged in Afghanistan say they're sick of talking about the problems. They want to hear about the solutions that are sustainable. And this is what we hope to discuss in today's panel. I have with me General V.K. Singh, India's Minister of State for External Affairs, Igor Morgulov, the Russian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and of course, last but not least, former President of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai. President Karzai, I'll begin with you. On the 1st of January, President Trump's first tweet was aimed at Pakistan. Enough of lies and deceits, he said, calling on them to end their support for terrorist networks. Are you cautiously optimistic?
Yes, ma'am. For the first time, after a long time, I found common ground with the United States. And precisely because of the truth that President Trump's tweet portrayed. We know, and the Americans knew all along, the presence of sanctuaries and the training grounds and all of that, and the motivational factors and ideological inputs, and that extremism was used as an instrument of policy by our neighbor, Pakistan. And during my government, this was almost the daily subject of talks between us and the United States. One of the reasons that led me not to sign or give the United States the bilateral security agreement was our dispute with America over this issue, the issue of the sanctuaries beyond our border, and the neglect of the United States in this regard. Now that the US has admitted that there is that problem, we hope that they will act now. When I say act, sometimes the press quotes me as Karzai asking for attack on Pakistan. No, I don't want that. I want action, which could be political, which could be pressure of all sorts. I'm not for war, not for military action, but for all other means to bringing Pakistan to a cooperative environment. And with regard to our cooperation, we have 2 of our great neighbors, India and Russia. The US has to involve our neighbors and big regional powers as well, including China and Iran. And this is a subject, of course, that you will come to later on.
General Singh, what are your thoughts? I mean, what is India's position on this? Has the United States reached out to India and asked for assistance to potentially back Pakistan into a corner so they can act?
See, India has been involved in Afghanistan in terms of humanitarian aid, assistance, because of our historical links. We have always been there. And what we see now is the new government in the United States which has come in. Like President Karzai said, let's see how various things that have been spelled out come on ground. So we are hopeful that a new initiative has started. And let me echo what President Karzai said. They have probably realized that some things which they were doing earlier have gone wrong. And now there is a course correction that is taking place. So let the course correction take place. And I'm quite sure we are there, as always, as friends of Afghanistan, to assist them in various fields that we have already done before.
Do you think, though, it's too little too late? You know, China is now a major backer of Pakistan, and Pakistan may not be affected by this cutting of financial aid. China is willing to step in and fill that gap.
I don't think so. Despite the type of economic power that China wields today, despite all the assistance that they are trying to give to Pakistan, the type of assistance dependence that Pakistan has with US far surpasses what China can do. And
in what sense?
All things. The type of influence US has in Pakistan is far above what China can do. It is the influence built for a very long time, 50s. So you don't suddenly, break the umbilical cord that exists. And if there is a pressure from United States, I'm sure it'll bear results.
Mr. Morgulov, what exactly is the nature of Russia's influence over the Taliban?
Over Taliban?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think we don't. I don't think we have influence over Taliban. We are very much concerned with the situation in Afghanistan for many years, and billions of dollars poured in this country and military efforts. We see no signs of the improving of the situation. Moreover, the situation is becoming more and more dire, and we are very much concerned. We are very much concerned. We have no, there are a lot of talk about possibility of Russia's assistance to
just
Taliban.
Yesterday, Moscow said that they were willing to facilitate talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government.
That's a principal difference. What we are proposing to create conditions and to provide venue, if needed, for dialogue between the government in Kabul and Taliban. But there are no evidence whatsoever with regard to Russia's assistance to Taliban. These are pure speculations, absolutely groundless.
That's certainly not what Afghan officials have said in the past 12 months. They've asked Russia to stop interfering in or meddling in internal affairs within Afghanistan.
We were never provided with any kind of evidence from Afghan government included about this so-called assistance. At the same time, we see situations, especially in the north of the country, where helicopters without any marks, without any insignia, bringing ISIL fighters to the north of Afghanistan. And Russia...
But what about Russian weaponry that was found in the north of the country?
No, it's not. How do you know this is Russian weaponry? I mean, if it is
Afghan
AK,
commanders
if it is AK, they are produced now almost everywhere. So this is no evidence again. And we, speaking about those helicopters which bring foreign fighters to Afghanistan, we asked government in Kabul and we asked NATO commandment where these come from, because we know that this is NATO and Afghan government who is controlling the airspace of Afghanistan. We have not yet received any substantial
These accusations
answer.
are often made. President Karzai has made similar accusations. I mean, what is the concrete evidence to support those claims?
Oh, we have some video, we have some local people saying to us, and not only to us, saying to the government, but government and NATO force is not responding to this evidence.
Because the foreign, I mean, when you say there's no real links with the Taliban, the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Russia has said that they have provided the Taliban with intelligence in the past, especially when it comes to the fight against ISIS.
We have some contacts with Taliban, as others do. Every participant of Afghan situation has its own channels with Taliban. Of course, we also have such periodical contacts, which is focused on two items: the security of Russian citizens in Afghanistan, and second one, issues how we can facilitate to let Afghan government and opposition force sit down and talk about peaceful reconciliation.
Because the common enemy for you is ISIS between you and the Taliban.
No, there is no we and Taliban situation here. ISIS is a common enemy of all of us, I think, and not only of Russia, but of Afghan government, of India and others. So please don't put blame on us. I mean, it's easy to find a scapegoat and to put all the blame on the country, which is absolutely trying to be fair, trying to help to our Afghan brothers. We are very much concerned with the suffering of this nation for decades.
President Karzai, you talk about solutions, but increasingly over the past 17 years now, we've entered the 17th year, it just becomes more and more complex and murky.
Yes, but before I go to that, let me just dwell for a while on the issues just discussed. China, ma'am, is as concerned about the spread of extremism as we all are. Yes, China has influence over Pakistan, but as Minister Singh said, the United States and Pakistan have been, to put it mildly, bedfellows on extremism for a long time. We know in Afghanistan how they together, including some Arabs, supported extremism in Afghanistan at immense cost to Afghan society and security. So truly, the United States continues to have influence and cooperative relationship with the Pakistan military and intelligence.
But isn't that now shifting and changing?
I hope so. And that's what we support. If that shift is there, we support it. Otherwise, we know the facts that extremism or the use of religious extremism as a tool is the product of US-Pakistan long-term relationship. You must have heard, it is reported, I haven't heard it from the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan himself, but I saw it in the press. Probably the source was Tribune or Express Tribune, where Khwaja Asif, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, said that we made a mistake in cooperating with America in the use of extremism against the former Soviet Union.
Well, they say that now because they feel backed into a corner.
Exactly. They're saying that was, but they're revealing a fact. They say this was a Nebraska project to nurture extremism and all. So the point is that the Americans and the Pakistanis have done a lot of harm to us by supporting extremism, and we hope both of them will stop doing that. The US has now spoken. We welcome it.
General, sorry, are you?
Yeah,
is there
continue,
another point?
continue.
Yeah, carry on.
On Russia, extremism was used against the former Soviet Union. We, the Afghan Mujahideen, were supported by the Americans and everybody else in order to defeat the Soviets. We, the Afghans, were fighting our own war against the former Soviet Union because they had invaded us. We wanted our liberation. But the United States was using us to destroy the Soviet Union. That's why they kept saying that they will fight to the last Afghan, and the Pakistanis were very much with them. The Taliban were against the former Soviet Union, as were the rest of the Mujahideen. They were part of the Afghan resistance. Today, ma'am, it is important for us to recognize that 15 years after the US presence in Afghanistan, in the name of the fight against extremism, Daesh has emerged under their full presence in Afghanistan. I think Afghans are the victims. The region is very much a victim. It's for the US and Pakistan to explain the rise of Daesh or extremism, and we will cooperate with them on this fully. On issues internal to Afghanistan, if I have a few minutes to talk,
yeah.
I'll go to 2002, when the tragedy of September 11 occurred. The world woke up to the grim reality of Afghanistan and all that was developing there. And the action by the international community, backed by the UN, backed by everybody else, and the arrival of the United States and allies in Afghanistan was welcomed by the Afghan people. We wanted the US to come to Afghanistan together with the rest of the international community so we could be freed from a creeping invasion of a neighboring country, namely, in this case, unfortunately, our neighbor Pakistan.
And America made it clear from the outset they were not there to nation build.
The Americans?
Yes.
Yes.
They were there
not-
for their
yes,
national interests.
Of course, they were there for their own interest, but we wanted them for our interest. And for a while, it worked very well. They helped with our democracy, they helped with our education, with improved health services, with improved economy, with all the good things in Afghanistan. The United States has been together with our other allies, a helpful country. And we are grateful for that. Where we have a problem with the United States was in its fight against extremism and terrorism. They targeted Afghanistan rather than targeting sanctuaries. And now with President Trump's tweet, we hope that that has changed and we will back them.
Can I bring in General Singh into this? I mean, when you hear President Karzai say that, is that India's view as well, that the United States has worked with Pakistan to build these safe havens and cause the rise of extremism in the region?
Of course.
What I would say is that, and this is well documented, it's documented everywhere. Benazir Bhutto said so,
Yes.
that extremism was fanned as a weapon
Exactly.
to contain and evict forces that had occupied Afghanistan at that time. Now, this plan of bringing in extremism, and I think we need to jump now into what happened thereafter. Extremism took over till you had to actually come in 2002 to clean it up all over again. Anybody who rides the tiger must know that one day the tiger is going to eat that person. What is Pakistan facing today? It's facing results of this support to extremism that it jumped in for. And more it supports extremism, more the dangers of going downhill.
So where does India see its relationship with Pakistan in, say, 3 decades from now?
See, it depends on how Pakistan plays on the relationship. We have always said we are willing to talk, we are willing to take the relationship forward, provided you do not support extremism, you do not fire and throw bombs into India, you do not instigate people to create problems in India or its borders. We would like our neighborhood to be friendly. I mean, we have...
Because you can't do it without Pakistan.
See, the onus is now on Pakistan. And that onus has been on Pakistan right from the time that our Prime Minister invited Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif for his oath-taking ceremony. Whereas it happened earlier. We had all the SAARC countries represented for the oath-taking ceremony in 2014. It was a clear signal being sent out, look here, we need to be friends. Our prosperity, peace, stability, and development of people lies in ensuring that there is peace on all the borders.
Can I bring in Mr. Morgulov before I open the floor up to the audience? Do you now see Russia's position as a counterweight to the US, just as you did in Syria?
No. We do not counterweight US in Afghanistan. We wish... Thank you. We wish American-led forces success in Afghanistan. And as you know, from the beginning of this operation, Russia was providing a very strong logistical support to the government of
But you've held
Afghanistan.
summits, you've invited most nations in Central Asia, and you haven't reached out to the US.
No. This is not true. There are a lot of speculations about Russia's position, and I'm very glad I took this stage and have opportunity to explain to you that Russia does not believe in military solution in Afghanistan.
True.
And what is the only, no alternative way of solving the Afghan situation is a peaceful reconciliation. talks between the government and military opposition and opposition forces. So the idea behind Russia's proposal to create a so-called Moscow format, and we had several meetings in this format, was to invite all neighbors of Afghanistan, Central Asian countries neighboring to Afghanistan, and who are also very much concerned with the situation in Afghanistan, and to discuss how all of us can help Afghan government and opposition to sit down and to talk.
But isn't
That
the
was
US
the only
critical?
idea, and the door for these consultations was open to the United States. We invited Americans to the Moscow format dialogue, and they didn't come. Explanation was very easy. At that moment, when we had this meeting in Moscow, there was no yet American strategy announced in Afghanistan.
Are you satisfied by the new strategy?
Not very much. Not very much. I don't believe it is new strategy. In my view, it is repetition of the old strategy, what Obama administration did.
But one
And
thing
again,
they
the
don't
main
have is a
emphasis-
timeline.
And the main emphasis in this strategy is a focus on military solution in Afghanistan, in which we do not believe. That's what differs us from Americans.
Exactly right.
In other areas, we are totally supporting the mission. We wish its success, but unfortunately, we don't see this success. It's not to our joy, believe me.
Okay, I'm going to open up the floor to the audience now. So we'll take a few questions, and I'll take it to the panel. If you could make your way to the microphones. There are microphones just in the middle. And can we please not have long statements? If you can restrict your questions to about 30 seconds. Sir, just here. It's working. Yep, just go ahead.
My question is to the panel. Newspaper.
No.
My question is to President Karzai. You have been strongly critical of Trump's Afghanistan strategy.
Yes.
And some would say this is because of you have always a long list of complaints against the US.
Plenty.
Do you think that your tendency to be vocal about those long list of complaints harms the Ashraf Ghani's government in Kabul?
No, it shouldn't harm that relationship. You see, I'm not an anti-American person, by the way. I'm very pro-American person. I'm very pro-West. So we wanted the United States to come and help Afghanistan, and we helped the United States to come and help Afghanistan. Ambassador Khalilzad is here. He knows how hard we worked during those years of upheavals during the Taliban and before, when a great many people from the Afghan community tried to convince the United States to come and help Afghanistan. But they wouldn't come. And now that you've asked this question, I'll give you a story. I was in a meeting in the year 2000 in Washington with a gentleman called Mr. Sheehan, I believe, who was the chief of counterterrorism in the US State Department. And when I told him the Afghan story, he said, look, we can only help you if you befriend Pakistan. So it was the United States and Pakistan then against us, the Afghan people. Even then, we wanted the US to come and help because we believed in their ideals and their democracy and the values that they had. We still want the US to continue to be in Afghanistan, to help Afghanistan. The idea of strategic partnership with America was my idea. I promoted this with President Bush. But when they neglected the realities of Afghan suffering and when they neglected the sanctuaries beyond our borders, when they kept fighting in Afghan villages, is where I began to oppose the US military approach in Afghanistan. Just like Minister Morgulov said, now a military solution is extremely difficult. The Taliban are part of the Afghan people. They are Afghans. And they are in control of territory in Afghanistan. The region is very different. 2002, when we started with the help of the United States and allies, the entire world, especially the big countries who are all our neighbors, were supportive of the United States of America. India was one of the greatest supporters of this enterprise. Russia was a supporter. I was taken on a Russian plane from Kabul to visit Moscow. And they encouraged US presence in Afghanistan, US activity in Afghanistan. Now, there are doubts. One great reason is the emergence of Daesh or IS. We don't know who is backing it. The US has to explain this. Therefore, today, for a solution in Afghanistan, we still want the US to play a big role, but that role has to be played together with other stakeholders in the region. That will bring us a solution, and that we support.
Okay, I have to just ask just a second, two of the fellows, the ORF fellows, to make an intervention and ask some questions. So can I please ask Javier to please ask his question?
My question is to His Excellency, Mr. Karzai. Sir, don't you think we are being too charitable and giving a benefit of doubt to China, especially after their decision to block India's bid to get Masood Azhar designated as a terrorist? What would prevent them from doing that to Afghanistan? And secondly, a linked question. How would you, on one hand, we are all happy that the United States has decided to withhold the funding, as Yalda pointed out. But how do you see their decision, as per reports, about this creation of good Taliban and bad Taliban, and how will it politically sync with the government of Afghanistan? Thank you.
Well, sir, China is a huge reality in this region and in the world. China is a neighbor of Afghanistan. And China has been kind to Afghanistan. They have helped Afghanistan. We know China is a great friend of Pakistan. But so is the US a great friend of Pakistan. It was a great friend of Pakistan. That does not deter us from seeking a good relationship with China. And nothing would deter us from seeking a good relationship with Pakistan. The Pakistani people have been tremendous hosts to the Afghan people. They received us as brothers and sisters, and we will remember that. We only have a complaint against the Pakistani military establishment, not the Pakistani people, not the Pakistani civilian government. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has been extremely forthcoming towards our desire together to have peace between the two countries and a brother relationship. So we hope that recognizing the facts on the ground, we move ahead. For us, the Afghan people, we want peace. And we know that peace will not come to us in conflict or in disarray among the major players in our part of the world. Therefore, we as Afghans are seeking. Of course, India-China relationship and rivalries, we know. Russia, the United States, we know. Iran, the United States, we know. Our job is to play all of them correctly.
And a question from Javed Ahmed.
Thank you. Javed Ahmed, I'm a fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington. My question is for President Karzai. And this concerns the ongoing domestic political tensions between the Afghan central government and the regional strongmen and warlords. But the problem goes much deeper than this. But by any measure, the Afghan politics has taken the shape of a predatory mafia over the years.
A shape of what?
A predatory mafia.
Predatory market?
A mafia.
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 A predatory mafia.
A predatory mafia.
Yes, got it.
And this has become fundamentally about two things, and that's money and muscles. And we've seen this over the last 13 or 14 years. It's also become increasingly criminal, which is as destabilizing to Afghanistan internal stability as the insurgency is. Now, this may come across as critical of you, and I'm a big fan of yours, but a great deal of this predatory internal politics has been the legacy of your government. I mean, your government wittingly tolerated or supported these criminal patronage networks that created a very small, elitist, very affluent, rich yet incredibly inept political class that, that promotes factional ethnic politics. Now, my question to you is, since this has turned Afghanistan into, or Kabul into a zero-sum place, and Afghanistan into a Shakespearean tragedy, how could you reverse this, or Afghan leaders reverse this very dangerous spread that's as bad as the insurgency?
So the question is, how can you reverse this?
Yes. Well, I agree with you and I disagree with you. I have both elements in your question. When Afghanistan was liberated from the creeping invasion, as I referred to earlier, in 2002, when the international community were all on board with us in support, when foreign influences in Afghanistan were positive, the Afghan people's job was to demonstrate what we had to do for our country, and we did it very well. We took to the villages of the country, to the ballot boxes, and we voted in millions. We brought back women to the workforce, and the Constitution guaranteed that. All the Afghan people came back to Afghanistan, and Afghanistan once again became the home for all Afghans. Women and men sat together in the parliament. Mujahideen and the former communists sat together in the parliament. The clergy and the seculars were in the same parliament. We demonstrated ably our ability to coexist, to have a society where ideas and different thinking were tolerated, and that we proved. The mafia that you refer to, the political mafia that you refer to, is not the product of Afghan society, but the product of impositions on the Afghan society. The billions of dollars that came during the Afghan resistance to the former Soviet Union, especially in support of such elements, and then the subsequent US presence in Afghanistan in the past 15 years with billions of dollars in contracts. That has really caused some people to become rich overnight, which is true. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're happy that people have become rich.
Not through corruption, though.
Well, no, I'm coming to this. Corruption is a fact of life in Afghanistan, as it is in all other countries. We are probably no more or no less corrupt than any other country around, including some in Europe and America.
We actually come second last on the index.
Well, those statistics I don't believe, those are Western institutions, and I know how they propagate things. We don't believe in those statistics. We also don't believe in what New York Times writes about the mafia in Afghanistan. Mafia is not an Afghan word, it's a Western word. We don't have mafia. We have rich people who sometimes behave badly, sometimes behave rightly.
Rich people with guns.
But Afghanistan is not what it is portrayed sometimes in the Western press. They, either for lack of knowledge and information, or with a deliberate attempt at trying to show us as savages. That's not true. We are a deeply cultured society. How often have you heard of, say, Khwaja Abdullah Ansari in the Western media? How often have you heard of Faryabi in the Western media? How often have you heard of Khushal Khan or Rahman Baba in the Western media? How often have you heard in the Western media for music of Ustad Sarahang or of Nashinas or of Ahmad Zahir, or the Afghan heritage or the Afghan society or our weddings or our food, all of that? It isn't what you read in the press there in the West. If I lived in America, I would be extremely pessimistic and negative about Afghanistan. Luckily, I don't live there. I live in Afghanistan, so I have a good view. And
my question.
And give us time. In one of the NATO meetings in I believe, Portugal, President Bush made a remarkable statement. There were people talking, our leaders, and he said, look, guys, he addressed the world leaders there, NATO members. He said, look, guys, how many hundreds of years took us to be where we are? And we suddenly want Afghanistan from all that destruction in 10 years to be a paradise. No, we can't be. Give us time and we will be, and stop interfering in us. In other words, stop supporting warlords.
Okay, I'll leave it at that then. I've got two questions here.
My question to the panel is that the Afghan Taliban is just another terror franchise of the ISI. I'm not saying this. Amrullah Saleh has said this. Hanif Atmar has said this. I mean, so why do you, every time when it happens, every time when the government changes, why do you go with the idea of talking to the Taliban? Might as well as talk to the ISI directly.
Yeah, we do talk to ISI as well. But the Taliban are Afghans. Even if they are in touch with the ISI, we have to talk to them. It's an Afghan reality. We have a problem in Afghanistan. Part of that problem is foreign aid. Part of the problem is our own. We cannot disown what is ours. Daesh is not us. We know Daesh is an imported product to Afghanistan and for a foreign purpose. But Taliban are not foreign. They are from our villages, they are from our homes. We know them all. Ask any Afghan from maybe here whether they have a Talib in their village, they will say yes. Now, the fact that they may be linked to ISI is not something that happened today. It is again the result of the US-Pakistani cooperation over years in support of extremism. And the effects come to us. But we have to live with our extremists. We have to find ways to find solutions with them, and we have to bring them to peace in their own country. We can't avoid that. I wish we could, but that's a fact of life, and we can't avoid it.
Lots of questions for President Karzai. We've just got one here, and then I'll come there. Actually, can we just take a round of 3 or 4 questions because we're running short of time, and I'll put it to the panel. If you can just briefly give me your question, please.
My question is directed towards President Karzai. Sir, this relates to relations between Afghanistan and Pakistan and their relation with regard to India. So firstly, considering the fact that some of NATO's most heavily used supply routes to Afghanistan pass through Pakistan, and they are currently under the control of the Resolute Support Mission, can you really be certain that the Trump administration will walk the talk with regard to tackling terror havens in Pakistan, such as the Haqqani network? And secondly, what is your current view on the legality of Pakistani occupation of Waziristan? Because as we all know, Afghanistan and Pakistan have often had a number of conflicts with regard to the Durand Line. And finally, Mr. Karzai, you have been a vocal critic of Pakistan's military and political policy in Balochistan. In 2016, you praised Prime Minister Modi's stance with regard to the question on Balochistan. So, I'm wrapping up quickly. What is your current view with regard to Balochistan's occupation with regard to Afghanistan, and what would be its consequences with regard to Afghanistan's own ethnic Baloch population?
Okay, I'm just going to take a question there as well, and I'll bring it back to the panel.
My name is Mariam Mordak. My question is directed to the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. At a time, U.S. has increased diplomatic pressure on Pakistan to act against terror sanctuaries. Do you think it's detrimental if Russia provides military aid to Pakistan? Why can't Russia pressure Pakistan to act against terror safe havens? Is Russia looking at a strategic opportunity of a Russia-China-Pakistan grouping versus U.S., India, Afghanistan? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just one there.
Hello, my question is to General Singh. India has been generally positive about Trump's new Afghanistan strategy, but in the light of realignments that we see, We already see that there is alleged some Russian Taliban connection, there is some Iran Taliban connection, and the kind of regional consensus that existed for Afghanistan is now entirely disturbed. So how do you see India sort of playing to get that regional consensus back? And in light of these regional alignments, is when there are more impediments for the strategy than there are roadblocks, how India can sort of move ahead specifically in this domain and not so much in the military? Thank you.
I'll get you to respond to that, General Singh, now. Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me start by saying that historically, Afghanistan was the area through which caravans passed, and the economy therefore bloomed. There came a time when Afghanistan has become a rentier state.
Yes, true.
It has to take money to survive.
Indeed.
Now, till the time the economy doesn't improve, till the time we do not open the routes, till the time we do not allow free flow of trade and commerce, you will find that there will be a problem in Afghanistan where it will remain dependent. India's interest lies in ensuring that Afghanistan becomes capable of ensuring what it had earlier in terms of a better economy. And that is where you find our attention has been in ensuring that we open up the routes, we allow things to flow in, we allow trade to take place so that the economy improves. We have been assisting Afghanistan in making certain water reservoirs and dams so that it helps in agriculture, where people can raise the standard of living and do not have to look at guns as a means of survival or being recruited because they don't have the money.
True.
Deputy Minister, a question for you. Is it detrimental to offer aid to Pakistan? And are you trying to change the nature of the alliances in the region?
You know, the terrorism is a common threat to all of us. I mentioned it earlier. It's a matter of concern not only to Russia, but to all countries of the region. And that's why we are providing support to the countries of the region to improve, to enhance their counterterrorism capabilities. First and foremost, we provide this support to Afghanistan. We are training Afghan National Security Force. We are sending weapons to Afghan National Security Force for free, by the way, and including those Kalashnikovs, which then we don't know where they go to. But at the same line, we provide support to Pakistan to improve its counterterrorism capabilities. We sold several helicopters to Pakistan, I'm sorry, to help them to fight and to help them to provide to have their own counter-terrorist operations. You know that Pakistan is also suffering from terrorist attacks. So, answering the question whether it's good to have trilateral arrangement, I was asked Russia, China, Pakistan. You know, we do not, I mean, any format which can bring result would be good. We will welcome any format, with Russia's participation or not. But in my view, the most optimal venue for such dialogue on Afghan issue is dialogue with the participation of all Afghan neighbors. India, of course, Pakistan, Iran, Central Asian nations, all must be included.
And there's no...
And that's why we are proposing Moscow format, and also just recently Shanghai Cooperation Organization, in which all of the mentioned countries are present, resumed so-called SCO Afghanistan contact group. And the first meeting of this contact group took place in Moscow in October. The next one will take place very soon in China. And I believe that dialogue with participation of all Afghan neighbors is the way to find solution to the issue.
And no one is arguing that dialogue, summits, discussion is critical and important to this. But when there is a strategy to put pressure on Pakistan, and India has just talked about the importance of maintaining that pressure so that they can act, is it then useful or helpful for you to then continue to assist with aid? When the panelists even today are saying they've been assisting with these sanctuaries and we need to put pressure on Pakistan.
Helicopters we sold to Pakistan are not used to in anything which is, bad for the Afghan situation.
Well, we don't know what these helicopters,
No.
could be
They're
used
fighting
for.
their own terrorists. We know that just recently, last year, they had a huge counterterrorism operation in Waziristan, and we wish them success. It's a common issue. Terrorism is a common problem for all of us.
Are you convinced by this, President Karzai, that Russia should continue to assist in aid? They're suffering as much as anyone else. Doesn't that go against what's being proposed?
Russian-Pakistan relationship?
Yes.
Russian-Pakistan relationship is very new. It isn't an old relationship. In the form of the Soviet Union, Russia was actually fighting Pakistan when we, the Mujahideen, were fighting the Soviet Union. I think there are 90 times more U.S. weapons in Pakistan than Russian weapons in Pakistan.
Yes, that's true.
Well, we're talking about correcting that now. So
Yes,
is it
exactly.
then helpful?
But shouldn't we first correct the U.S. part, 90%?
They're working on it.
When they do that, then we will go to Russia and ask them to stop. They will.
No, our cooperation with Pakistan
That is the thing.
is very much limited.
It's very new.
That's true.
It's very. I'm sorry, I can't talk more on this subject. It's very new. So let's go to the U.S.-Pakistan relationship and let's correct that. Let's also go to China and ask our Chinese neighbors that they must bring equal pressure on Pakistan in this regard. The Russian-Pakistan relationship is new and not as impactful as the American-Pakistan relationship. Russia is not as close to ISI as the CIA is. Russian military is not as close to the Pakistani military as the U.S. military
But
is.
as the relationship
why?
and rift between the
You
US...
know why? You know why? I was in a conversation some years back, just before Vice President Biden became the U.S. Vice President. Some U.S. senators were there, including Senator Lieberman and McCain and Graham, and that time Senator Biden. When I pressed the U.S. delegation on Pakistan and their support to Pakistan and the continuity of extremism arriving from there to Afghanistan and the trouble that it caused to Afghanistan and the U.S. mission in Afghanistan, suddenly Vice President Biden got up from his place and said, look, Mr. Karzai, Pakistan is 50 times more important for us than you, Afghanistan. That is the relationship that we should focus on. When you come to Afghanistan, the United States, to fight extremism, but when a country that is backing extremism is 50 times more important to you than we who are suffering and you have come to end that suffering, of course you fail. Of course we suffer. That has to end. President Trump's speech is welcome, but he must walk the talk, and we will wait for him to do it rather sooner.
Is that something you agree with, General?
I think we need to wait for things to materialize. And what I would like to add is that the danger today the world faces is from extremism, from radicalization.
Exactly.
And anybody who supports, either directly or indirectly, is bound to suffer themselves. And we have seen this happening, whether Daesh established itself and now has been cornered, whether it has been wiped out or not, nobody knows. It seems to be springing up at various places in the world. And therefore, focus has to be on ensuring that no support to extremism takes place. And that is where I think when the US says that it needs to pressurize Pakistan, I'm quite sure this must be at the back of the mind.
Will India work on pressuring China and Russia?
The extremism needs incentive. The moment you start giving even a little bit of support, after all, China has its own minorities. There are very vulnerable areas in southern part of Russia. I'm quite sure both the countries are cognizant of this fact. And therefore, we would be very happy if we ensure a cooperative environment in which we focus on extremism and radicalism.
Exactly.
I totally agree. It's not a matter of finding, a scapegoat and pressuring it. It's a matter of sitting together and discuss and find mutual interest and compromise.
Okay, and I've just got these questions, we're short on time, that was asked for President Karzai. You've already answered whether Trump will walk the talk. And the other one was Pakistan's occupation of Waziristan, and if you wanted to comment on the Durand line as well as the Baluchistan policy.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, the Durand line is a legacy from the colonial rule, from the British rule. Afghanistan, even then in 1893, when this was drawn, did not accept it because it separates us into two, and we have been refusing it since then, and all along, all Afghan governments and the Afghan people, so the Durand line is not acceptable. But this doesn't mean that we don't want to have good relations with Pakistan. We want to have the best of relations with Pakistan, and hopefully the two of us can recognize this need and sit together and find ways. Yes, I did endorse Prime Minister Modi's stand on the rights of the Baluchi people, that they should be treated well and respected, and that their rights given. So I still hold that endorsement of Prime Minister Modi's statement.
Thank you. And look, we've got about 5 minutes, so I'll take two quick questions. Just one here and one here, please. Yep, go ahead. Sorry, just a second. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Virginia Comoli from the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London. My question is to all panelists. One issue that seems to have slipped down the strategic agenda and in fact was not mentioned today is the one of narcotics. Yet the production of heroin and its trafficking have played a critical role in fueling the insurgency, fueling corruption, which in turn has undermined governance and the development of a solid, licit economy. What are your views going forward when it comes to addressing this problem, which remains rampant, including from the point of view of public health, because a growing number of Afghans are now drug users?
Thank you. And just here.
Thank you very much. This is Ali Masra Afshar from Afghanistan. And my question goes to Mr. President Hamid Karzai. And it has been decades that we are suffering from war, insurgency, and a lot of problems in Afghanistan. And I can say maybe since Dzerzhinsky's activity when it started on our borderlines. So what said that, and everyone knows this, that it has been decades that we are suffering from these problems. What is it that now the United States of America does some reactions in a Twitter level only? What is it that they show reaction this much late? And the other part of the question is, when we don't have deterrent power in the battlefields and a very well fortified army and firepower, how can we expect the insurgents and terrorists to come to the talks and to be expecting them to be sensible?
Okay, thank you.
Much.
Thank you. First of all, to all the panelists, we've just got a few minutes, but if you can comment on the narcotics and the production of heroin fueling the insurgency. Yes.
This is a very good question, and this situation is also bothering Russia very much. We believe coalition force is not doing enough to fight narcotics production. I have my statistics here. And according to UNODC, last year set a new record for the area under opium poppy cultivation, which increased by 63%. And opium production itself rose by 88%, up to 9,000 metric tons. A number of poppy-free provinces in the country decreased to 10 out of 34. This is a very dire statistics, and unfortunately, President Karzai, I believe it's true statistics, and definitely, we know that these money from narcotics, from drugs, they are important means of financing terrorism. That's why I believe all of us, but coalition force mostly, must do much more in order to fight this problem, which relates to public health, not only in Afghanistan, Central Asia, but Russia as well, and Europe and elsewhere.
President Karzai, if you wanted to briefly, the question was to all the panelists on counter-narcotics.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I think the Indian audience, probably also to an extent the Russian audience, would respond well if, to a fact that Afghanistan is known to be the best producer of fruits. Especially in India, our dry fruits, our raisins and pomegranates and grapes and all that. So we were not a poppy-producing country. Poppy production is the consequence of war in Afghanistan and of conflict in Afghanistan and of the desperation that has caused to the Afghan people. Villages were emptied, water resources dried up, terraces and canals destroyed. People moved out of their own country, and poppy was the easiest thing to resort to. And the international mafia, I must now here come to the question of mafia, and the international drug mafia would come to people's doors in their villages and offer them money in advance for the purchase of poppies produced there. This led to the mushrooming and increase in poppy production. The more Afghanistan has a hope for a better tomorrow, the lesser the poppies in Afghanistan. The more conflict in Afghanistan, the more the poppies in Afghanistan. And the money, we've been involved in this for a number of years now. Sometimes estimates are that the price of Afghan poppy in the international market is somewhere between 60 billions to, I don't know, over 100 billions. So if that is an Afghan money, how come we are so poor a country? This means the money doesn't come to Afghanistan. The UN says that Afghans receive from $2 to $4 billion of the revenues, or whatever you call it, from poppies. The rest of it goes to big banks. And the big banks are not in Afghanistan, they are in the West. Second, in the past 14, 15 years during my government, where we, the Afghan government, were fully in charge in that province, poppies were the minimum or none. Where the international forces were the highest in number, those provinces had the highest percentage of poppy growth as well. So now you make your own conclusions as to what's going on in Afghanistan, as to who is doing it, and who is profiting it. And of course, as on all other issues, we get the bad name, others get the money.
General Singh, I don't know if you want to comment, but we're coming close to time, so if you had 10 seconds of commentary on counter-narcotics.
No, all that I would say is that strategy-wise, what you need is, if you have the coalition forces working out there, they need to create conditions which would allow democracy and politics to flow freely, leading to development and assistance to people. Till the time development and assistance to people does not take place, you will always have people who will get weaned away towards extremism. And this cycle needs to be firmly established so that economically Afghanistan can become self-sufficient so that no poppy can be grown out there.
And I think that's all our hopes. And listening to the panelists today, these key regional players, we've realized the importance of finding solutions that are sustainable in Afghanistan that will benefit the entire region and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank my panelists for today's session.